Hey everyone, before you watch this interview that I did with Russell Hunter, I want to set it up in two different ways for two different reasons. First of all, once you get into the heart of the interview, you're going to see, to no one's surprise, that both I and Russell have very strong opinions about the work that we need to be doing to bring about the end of child sacrifice in North America and the differing views on how we go about doing that. So, the first thing I want to say is obviously we hold these positions very dearly. And so you're going to be hearing some sort of language or some sort of assessment of people and movements that's going to be very strong and very opinionated. And you need to understand that these come from places of deep biblical conviction, not because we have bones to pick with anyone, not because we're out to get anyone, not because we have dogs in the fight, not because of jealousy or envy, but legitimately because of a desire to honor the Lord and obey his word faithfully and fully. So that's the first thing. Get ready for a little bit of a spicy conversation, which is good. It's good to have. The second thing is this. Part of the interview with Russell was to talk about the upcoming Maple Abolitionism conference happening in Mississauga. But because the discussion was so good and because Russell and I were just in the throes of it, we didn't get a whole lot of time to talk about the conference. So I needed to make sure I brought that up now at the onset of the interview. So September 18th to 20th in Mississauga at the Mill Christian Fellowship in Mississauga. Friend of the show, Steve Bainbridge, that's his church. They will be hosting the Maple Abolition Conference. Registration is free. You don't have to pay anything. If you go to mapleabolition.ca, you can register and sign up. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There will be speakers, panel discussions, and they'll actually be doing some street evangelism, some out in the GTA evangelism as well that you can join. And just to give you an idea of who's going to be there, John Speed, who is a friend, he's been on the show several times, director of and or producer and kind of creator behind End Abortion Now, Babies Are Murdered Here, Babies Are Still Murdered Here. John will be there. Also, Matt Truella, that Matt and I got to interview, the writer of The Doctor of a Lesser Magistrate, he will be there. Russell Hunter, the founder of Abolitionist Rising, he's going to be there. Laura Clausen, who we've been able to interview several times on the show, founder of Choice 42, she's going to be there. It's going to be an amazing time. I'm going to be there for at least a part of the conference. So if you're anywhere and around the Mississauga GTA area, head to mapleabolition.ca, sign up, register for free, plan on being there. It is going to be quite the time together, encouraging, I think challenging, convicting, and hopefully continue to stir up more and more Canadians to actively work against the murder of preborn babies so that by God's grace we can work toward the abolition, the end of child sacrifice in our country. So enjoy the discussion I had with Russell. Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to a very special edition of Liberty Dispatch Interviews. I am quite pleased to be bringing in some friends and first-time guests to the show as we're talking about not only a very important and growing movement in Canada, but also we're going to be looking toward a very important event that will be taking place really just in a month or so that we want you to know about. I plan on being there, and we definitely want you to connect with, especially if you're anywhere near Mississauga at the time. So it's my joy to bring on the show Russell Hunter. He reignited the abolitionist movement against abortion in 2010 and has been a leader of it ever since. He played a key role in the filing of the first abolition bill in 2016, which led to abolition bills being filed in states nationwide. In 2018, he managed communications for gubernatorial candidate Dan Fisher, leading to the founding of Free the States, the first abolitionist lobbying and educational group. In 2023, he launched Abolitionists Rising. And if you have seen his content on Facebook, I'm sure you have, it's quite prolific, in order to expand the movement nationally. Married to Catherine, that's my wife's name as well, but spelled differently. Since 2005, they have 4 children. Russell holds a master's degree in the history of science from the University of Oklahoma. He's an accomplished artist and his work is used globally to grow the movement and advance the biblical ideology of abolitionism. And much to the chagrin of that long-haired hippie, he has read The Origin of Species in both German and French. Russell, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really appreciate having you.
Glad to be here. I haven't read, fully in German and French, just big chunks.
That's all you need. That's enough.
I studied the origin of species so thoroughly that they allowed me to use it in my French and German exams in grad school. So I like the hype, but don't expect me to speak French and German.
I don't. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, Russell, anyone who might not be familiar with your work, or even I've used the word abolitionist a few times, even as I was kind of introducing you. We've had John Speed on before. We've had Laura Clausen on a couple times. But there might be some people in our audience who are hearing that, and when they think abolition, they're thinking that kind of sounds like slavery a little bit, the abolition of slavery, or they might be thinking, the Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. Could you kind of briefly articulate the difference between abolitionism, right? So I would say if we're talking a spectrum in the we don't like abortion world, let's just call it that. Mm-hmm. I would say in that spectrum, on the far end over here, you would have, the pro-life movement. And then you would move into maybe people who'd be willing to say, well, we're anti-abortion. Maybe you have people who are incrementalists. And then you have abolitionism. So distinguish abolitionism from what's traditionally known as the pro-life movement, both in its tactics and really also in the, I guess more importantly, in the guiding and defining principles that sets abolitionism aside from the rest.
Yeah. So just the first thing to address there, whenever you hear the word abolitionist, most people, less and less because of the movement growing, but most people are going to think abolitionist of slavery. But every age has its evils. Every age has its abolitionist because it's an actual truth and fact in human history that the Lord Jesus Christ has a people, and anywhere that he has a people and there's a grave, dehumanizing, destructive, and legalized evil going on, you're going to get an abolitionist movement. You're going to get people who rise up and try to remove that evil from their midst. You can't help but read the Word of God and see from the beginning to the end of the book this, exhortation from the law, from the prophets, from the apostles, from Christ himself to, basically love your neighbor as yourself and establish equal justice for all human beings, because all human beings are made in the image of God. And so as long as you have Christians and as long as you have the Bible, you're going to have abolitionism. It's going to emerge. And that is just, simple, basic, the idea. I mean, if you look up abolition or abolitionist in a dictionary, you're often going to get slavery as a sort of example. But the word is just abolish. It's change the laws or the system that's in place that's protecting an evil to removing that evil, abolishing a thing. Oftentimes in the legal setting, it is criminalizing an act that is not criminal, abolishing laws that allow an act to go on. So in the cultural arena, it is, to quote like the prophet Isaiah, it's ceasing to do evil, learning to do good, and establishing justice for the fatherless and the widow. So for any human being that's from, the fatherless child to the abandoned woman who's being destroyed, establishing justice. So I think it's a prophetic, God-breathed and led and ordained movement that you can find throughout really all human history. You see the first impulses of abolitionism are, the first expressions of abolitionism that we have in, human history and record is Moses and dealing with Pharaoh, where Pharaoh's got he's oppressing his, workforce, his slave the slaves in his nation, oppressing, mistreating them, having them kill their children, etc. Moses rises up to let those people go, and of course, the narrative there shows us that in the pursuit of justice and in the pursuit of doing what's right and freeing the people, you've got Pharaoh who offers increments or regulations, improvements in order to keep the people in slavery. How about this increment? How about I let you have the freedom to do this? How about I let you go to this degree or to that degree? And you get Moses at the direction of God saying, no. This thing's being abolished. We're out of here. This is let my people go, not let some of my people go or let some of my people go for some time. This is we are leaving the land of Egypt. And so from Moses through the prophets on up through, the birth of the early church abolishing infanticide, gladiator games. Then you have the abolition of slavery with replacement with a feudal system. Then you get the abolition of the slave trade. You get the abolition of various evils in different cultures throughout time, simply because Christians are looking at grave, dehumanizing evils going on in their midst and saying these things must cease, and they must be replaced by just treatment.
So do you think, I was just finished reading in Second Kings, and that tell me if this is an accurate way of defining abolitionism as opposed to some other things which you're going to contrast in a moment. Abolitionism doesn't say let's simply reduce the amount of evil. Abolitionism says it's all got to go. So in the case of the kings of Judah, the kings of Israel were all bad, but in the case of the kings of Judah, you have this unpacking of all the kings, and you'll have all these kings where it says, this king, right, kind of maybe did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. However, they did not remove all the high places. And then you have one exception to that, which is Josiah. And it says Josiah's heart was wholly after the Lord. He did what was right, and he also removed all the high places. So Josiah was the abolitionist. It's all got to go. We can't have this compromised half and half where we're reading the law, we're worshiping God, but you can still go worship Baal at a high place. Whereas the other kings didn't go all the way. They still allowed for the high places for whatever reason, fear, compromise. Maybe they enjoyed a little idol worship themselves. But Josiah was the abolitionist king who says all the evil must be removed from the land.
Josiah, the abolitionist king, is a great example of it. You find it throughout the Bible. Like my favorite, it's a bit violent, but my favorite example of like contrasting sort of abolitionism with regulationism or incrementalism, which the opposite of abolitionism really is regulationism. And there's a difference between maybe regulationism and incrementalism we can go into. But the contrast that I see most clearly is in Samuel, whenever King Saul is commanded to destroy the Amalekites and King Agag, and the command is clear. It's from the prophet to him. You are to destroy this people. They attacked us whenever we first set foot on our way to the promised land. They are evil. They must be blotted out. And God's command is very clear. And then Samuel goes in, they have the battle, and he does not kill the king, and he does not kill certain choice animals and others. And Samuel shows up and says, "Hey, what are these bleating goats that I hear?
Yeah. What is this bleating of sheep that I hear?" Yeah.
Yes. And then the king says, "Well, I'm going to do that." So there's the incrementalism. I'm going to do that. The reason I haven't done it is because, look, it's as good. They even put a religious tone on it. I'm going to sacrifice these animals to the Lord. I'm going to set up this thing to the Lord. I'm going to say I'm doing it all for the Lord. And then, my plan is to do this, but then the prophet rebukes him and he says, no, well, I was worried about what the people. So you have this whole package of him not doing justice because he's listening to the people. He's thinking about, furtherance of his own kingdom and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, Samuel is, in this case, he's the abolitionist. tells Saul that he's in error. The Lord's moving on from him, and then he hacks Agag to pieces right there in front of everyone. And so that's like this full-on obedience to God when it comes to how to remove evils instead of leaving them around, regulating them. And so it doesn't matter if you're looking at Old Testament, New Testament, you're going to see this impulse of allowing a little evil in the pursuit of getting some good versus stepping out in obedience and faith. And it usually comes across to the wisdom of man of the world as a bit delusional. Like, really? Can we really let all the people go? Can we really destroy them entirely? Do we really have to melt down all of the idols? Can't we keep some of them? Do we really have to tear down all the high places? And so you see it throughout the Bible, but then you see it throughout history when dealing with the slave trade. Wilberforce puts up a bill to abolish the slave trade. It's Britain needs to not be involved in buying people or stealing people and carting them across the Atlantic to work to death in the mines, right? Or in the cotton plantations. Well, when he puts that bill forward, other well-meaning, professing Christians stand up and say, well, how about instead of a bill to abolish the slave trade, we regulate it and make it safer for the slaves? Because the concern really is they're dying on the boats. How about we regulate it? Or how about we cut down the number of slave ships? Or how about we give them more space? So on and so forth. This impulse to regulate it. And the excuses are always the same. Like, we can't do this because it'll destroy our economy or whatever. We can't do this because to go from doing this evil thing to not doing it will be destructive and a lacking benefit for our people. So in the area of abortion, which we can go into, that we have the same choice before us. Do we, we all think abortion's murder, and we all think that it, should be abolished. The question is when we, write bills or set policies or even speak, should it be abortion is murder? It should be treated as murder, and murder is criminalized. Should it be that? Or should it be like, well, that's a far off goal. Right now, abortion is murder. And I agree that it's murder, but rather than criminalizing it, let's write a law that says this kind of abortion instead of that kind of abortion. Let some of the people go. Let some of the children live.
I think that this kind of attitude toward evil, interestingly enough, and it's funny, you and I have chatted just briefly about this on social media in the past surrounding the election of Donald Trump. I think that this plays out in a number of ways. It's kind of interesting that the people that I know that are abolitionist hold the same view on should believers support Donald Trump as I do, which is no. And the perspective is the lesser of two evils game does not please the Lord. That's not actually principled at all. Also, when the scriptures are clear, both in the Old and New Testament, whenever believers are given the opportunity to appoint or elect someone to lead in any capacity, civil or religious, we're given prescriptions for the quality and the character of said leader. And so we kind of look at this and think, listen, the scriptures are clear. It has to be this kind of guy. It has to be, the role of the state is this. And so it's pretty cut and dry. We can't support Donald Trump. And I think part of what drives that attitude is, and I see this with Trump, I see this in Canada as well. We just had a by-election in another province. So the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada lost in his riding this last election shamefully. And so what he did is he convinced a member of parliament in another province, in a very conservative province, to step down so he could take his seat so that he could be back in parliament. And the member of parliament that he replaced, who was very anti-abortion, this guy who's now the leader of the party, is vocally expressed his support of abortion. So it's all very corrupt.
Following Trump in the sort of let's not make conservatism about
it's all
abortion.
Very corrupt. And I think one of the things that drives it is this belief, if we go all the way, it seems it's too difficult or too impossible. Really, we just don't believe that God will bless it.
Right.
Like, we don't actually believe that if we are principled in the way we cast our vote and don't cast a vote for Donald Trump, that will plunge our nation into ruin, and believers are now going to suffer immensely.
Yep.
And we forget the scriptures that, well, Egypt faced the plagues, but God protected his people in Goshen. Or Jerusalem was devastated in 70 AD, but the Christians, once the intensity of the persecution subsided, were not in Jerusalem when the temple came down because they obeyed Christ. So maybe if we had enough faith to believe that God will actually bless our obedience, we wouldn't be so worried about the wrath of tyrants or the people around us.
Yeah, you could sum it up. It is fear of God or fear of man. But like, I mean, people don't like hearing this because like believers hate being told, oh, your problem is the lack of belief. But that really is what this is. They think it's so judgmental. Like I'm telling them that they're going to hell. No, I'm repeating the same thing that's repeated throughout the entire scriptures. Like you are lacking belief. Like you need to be rebuked. You are failing to honor God. You're failing to walk humbly with God. You're walking with your own mind. You're not walking with God. And so like one thing to add with the whole Donald Trump and political system situations, like people want to vote for like a leader because they want to get the best that they can get, or they want to preserve things, or they're really worried about what will happen if that other person will win. The thing that they fail to understand is the two things that you mentioned about being principled and then being honorable men and all that kind of thing. The third is do you want a leader who's going to bring the wrath of God against your nation? And when you vote, you're voting to bring the wrath of God against your nation. If it said like in the very direct legal sense for nations that write laws and elect leaders, if the leader is saying, I will not establish justice for fatherless children, I will pass iniquitous decrees, I will not criminalize child sacrifice, according to the law of God and according to all the prophets, God is against you. He's not just sort of like, oh, okay, Trump's better than Biden or Kamala Harris, or this conservative is better than this liberal. No, it's not that. It's you people who are called by my name and according to my word are saying that you are going to vote positively for someone who's saying they will veto a bill to criminalize abortion. Like this is a man who says, I mean, this is like in biblical language, an abomination. Like I will, like Donald Trump is tweeting during the height, like, okay, he dodges bullets. And then he, weeks later he tweets, oh, you're worried about abortion? Don't. My candidacy and my leadership is not going to be a problem for abortion rights. Like people who want abortion are going to love my presidency. And I promise to veto any bill that abolishes abortion. That brings the wrath of God. And the wrath of God and the judgment of God is shown in all sorts of ways. Open borders, economics, like, sexual confusion and all this gender nonsense.
Well, he just promised not that long ago, promised to fund IVF.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you saw, I was just
federally.
reading something from LifeSite News the other day that a new research is showing that from 1978 until 2018, 250 million babies died.
And that
IVF.
is just the smallest amount that they're counting.
Yeah, I know. That's
like the selective
way
reduction
more
numbers.
than the tracked child sacrifice via abortion, which in the United States I think is 60 million at this point. That's more than 4 times that at the very least. That is an even greater genocide. And Donald Trump has said, "Oh yeah, let's fund that." Okay, so let's let states decide on abortion. Right.
Yeah.
So this is what we get. This is, and Saul is the prime example of the people saying, "Give us the best we can get. Give us a king like the other nations." And then what do you get? You get a man who brings God's wrath upon Israel.
And what does he promise you? He promises you the protection of your own wallet. Like, I'll protect your own wallet, your own freedoms. I'll make you great. It's always like, I'll make you great, your nation great, and all this kind of stuff. And so all the Christians are like looking out for themselves. And then the gospel demands that we look out for the least of these. We look out for, our fellow man. And so it's sad. And I think the reason that abolitionists get such a bad rap and people don't like us is because we're telling them the truth. We're telling them what time it is, what God thinks about us. It really is prophetic in that way. This is This is the reality. You're professing to know and follow the Lord, but you are acting as those in Scripture who were always bringing either his wrath or his discipline at best, his discipline at best. But I think it's definitely the wrath of God against our nation. And so when the first time that, you say, well, wait, but wouldn't we still get that wrath with the Democrat? Well, we don't actually know what it would look like if the Republicans or the conservatives or, whatever they're called in your country, right? Like if the true followers of Christ did stand up and say, no, we're going to have faith in God. And we're going to say, you do not have our vote unless you seek justice, unless you honor God. Like you don't. The Republican Party may lose, but the next time we get an election, you know what they're going to put before us? A candidate that seeks to establish justice, because they need the Christian vote. In the United States of America, no Republican candidate is getting elected without like the Southern Baptist.
Yeah, here too. The conservatives need the Christian, they need the evangelical vote. They need it here, or they'd be devastated if they didn't have it.
So, but it's the lack of belief.
Yeah.
And I love the thing you said about God will preserve his people.
Yeah.
Like
I think that's what we don't
Goshen
believe.
is what we would experience. And we're so scared, like all through the election, this last election. I feel bad. It's like all these namby-pamby. I don't want to say too many names. Yeah, I won't say any names, but like
I know who you're talking about. We know.
On
we know
Twitter
who you're
and all this
about.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The appeal to the Christians to vote for their great savior, and they hate it whenever the appeal is always fear. It's always like if you don't elect Donald Trump, there are going to be bad people of the wrong kind of people attacking you in your neighborhood. You're not going to be able to take your kids on a walk without being overrun by, these races that you don't like. And it's like, what is going on? Or the liberal nonsense is going to grow. No, check the actual record. Voting for Trump becoming president, what happens? God sees the actions of all these Christians. I don't want to have too much of a tinfoil hat here, but God sees the actions and the voting of all these religious followers of Christ, professing believers, and the nation is judged. And that's whenever you see the increase in all this gender confusion, all this outward LGBTQ pride.
Russell, who pushed the jabs?
Yeah, and you get that.
Who dropped the first $4 trillion stimulus package that basically was the beginning of the recession in your country?
Yeah, and
economically things were moving up, and then it was all him. It was all Trump.
And then they're blind, and they vote for it again, and they don't even see it. And it's and then their vaunted freedom of speech and all this kind of, they're getting locked down and told what to do with their bodies. So it's just like in the Old Testament where God says, okay, you do this, the judgment is going to be that. Like, you abort babies, the judgment is, here's this plague. Your babies are going to get miscarried. I'm going to screw you guys. This is what you wanted. You will eat, whenever they set up the golden calf, right? They worship the golden calf when God said, don't worship me through these images. So they set up this image, Well, Moses grounds that thing down and makes them drink it. And that's what God does. He's making us drink our votes. And whenever you walk around in the world and you don't like it the way that it is, you made it. You made it in the way you voted. And why did you vote? Because you feared man and not God. So I'm glad you went into all that.
In 2 Samuel 24, I've used this to try to convince believers to vote in a principled way. And I think it applies here as well. In 2 Samuel 24, because David took the census against God's commands, God says, listen, David, the judgment's coming. So judgment's unavoidable. You pick your poison. You want 3 years of famine? Do you want 3 months of your enemies pursuing you? Or do you want 3 days of pestilence? And so what God was offering was either I can give you the judgment directly from my hands. You can take the judgment still through me, but ultimately through the hands of your enemies. Would you prefer that? or 3 years of famine by, what the land will do. And then David's response is curious. He says, better to find myself in the hands of the Lord than in the hands of man, for his mercy is great. And then
Yeah.
the judgment falls, and after 3 days, a whole bunch of people die.
Yeah.
But David's response was, I would rather face the wrath of God head on. Like, I'd rather take the judgment, and I'd rather take the punishment for my sins and the sins of my nation head on. I'll pour it on me, God, than say, I'd rather the wrath of my petty tyrant, because maybe that'll be more comfortable. I'd rather the enemy bring me his wrath, like I'll vote for the compromise guy, and maybe that'll be better. I'd rather the wrath of Trump, forgetting that the Old Testament scriptures are full of, Hezekiah, if you go to Assyria, if you go to Babylon thinking they're going to save you from Assyria, well, Babylon's going to take you anyways.
Yeah.
Like there's no comfort to be found in Egypt.
Yeah.
Like it's obedience to God.
And over and over. And that's why it's always, don't go down to Egypt. Don't trust in the war horses and chariots. They're at the bottom of the Red Sea. And we see the same thing. The people always forget. It's just, it's how we are. And what do they do when people like yourself, like, stand up and say something? Of course, you're mocked and ridiculed. Like Moses and Aaron saying, hey, we went and we talked to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. And he said, I don't even know your God. I'm going to make your work harder, and you're going to take away the straw, and you're still going to make the same amount of bricks. And they were angry with Moses. It's the same thing. Like these Christian, and they're often the people who are the most dead set on creating a Christian nation. They will tell anyone who's speaking prophetically like this about the reality of serving God and not man, that you are making it harder on us. Like we do not want to live in the world that you are making. It's fundamentally it's a lack of trust in God. It's a lack of obedience, and it's a self-love. It is everything contrary to all of the Christian life. And the one thing I want to add, just sort of like getting to the, kind of connect this to maybe people that are like, they're like on our side, like, I'm with you. The so-called principled incrementalist, right? The one who agrees with all this, but thinks there is a way to get to it as long as you're always claiming it. Think about it. It's the same thing. It's the same spirit of being okay with calling for less, but committing to doing more. And so we're facing a situation where abortion's murder. God says what you do with people who murder their children, you punish them. That's it. And someone says, oh, I agree with that, but there's an increment that you can do on the way to that. No, the increment brings the judgment of God. The increment that's on the way to that, it doesn't matter if you have a signing statement. It doesn't matter if you're planning to do more. It doesn't matter any of that. That increment, you have to look, okay, is the increment good or evil? Well, it's not criminalizing. Like, is it criminalization or is it not? Is it equal or is it not? Is it iniquitous? Does it show partiality or is it not? And so you have people that are emerging as abolitionism spreads who are saying, I'm with you guys, but I think this is going to be more successful, or so getting the most good that you can get. So everything that you're saying about voting for Trump, every last argument, you can check them. They all apply to smash mouth incrementalism, full on. Because a lot of people are kind of like, man, I'm with you on this, and they feel all good. And I don't want people who feel good about what I'm saying to not realize, no, I'm talking about you. Like that person, like you're thinking, oh, you're right, voting for Trump brings the judgment of God. And that's why I follow my man, Smash Mouth Incrementalist. No, Smash Mouth Incrementalism brings the judgment of God. Your borders are open and your people are being raped financially and physically. Your children are being turned into the wrong gender in their minds. That is all happening because you, dear great Christian leader with podcast and principle, are doing the very thing that we are saying you should not do. And that is, why are you doing it? Like, why are you on that? I agree with this, but I'm finding a principled increment. Why are you saying that? fear of man, the desire to do the best. It's all the same argument. I
Well,
just wanted to apply it boldly.
well, with respect to brothers and friends that I actually know dearly and have a relationship with dearly.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, the smash mouth incrementalist,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any that outrightly said Trump
They
cannot
weren't
be
voting for
supported.
Trump.
Period.
Nope.
They all try to make some sort of case for why, because Trump is like Jehu or Trump is. I'm just like, that's
Yeah.
you don't know. You don't know the heart of man. God's assessment of people is different. God can do what
He's a
God
baby
does. He can
Christian
raise
for the
up.
past decade.
God can raise up who he wants. That's up to him. Ultimately, the only being in this earth who ultimately has the authority to work these things out over time is God, right? So God in his mercy doesn't say to believers, once he saves us and fills us with the Spirit, he doesn't just say, I abolish all sinfulness in you. God does, interestingly enough, work incrementally in us.
Yeah.
But that's God's prerogative. That's his authority.
Mm-hmm.
He has the ability to do that.
That's how things happen in time. Things do happen. Like, you're never going to get incremental change without growing numbers of abolitionists.
Mm-hmm.
But can I piggyback and say, no, that's 100% true, because all the incrementalists are also either pro-Trump or hold my nose and vote for Trump and
Right.
everything in there. And then when you look at their arguments, even if they're on CNN, it's how to create a Christian nation in the age of Trump. Trump being president is allowing them to carry out their project of making a Christian nation. You cannot make a Christian nation without abolishing child sacrifice. And then not only are they the ones voting for Trump, they're the ones that are actually leading people astray from the abolitionist cause. So they, not to put it too strongly, but some of the little ones that they're leading astray and causing multitudes of Christians not to listen to abolitionists, and therefore the abolitionist movement not to have any political power. Well, it's better that a millstone would be put around their necks than to lead all those people astray. Because all we're trying to do is get people to follow God boldly and in faith and toss a mountain of child sacrifice into the sea. But they've built up all sorts of reasons to follow, Jeroboam. It's despicable, it's wicked, and it's clear once you see it. But the reason people don't see it is for all the reasons that we're enumerating. They are loving themselves, looking out for themselves. They've got an idea of the kind of thing they want, and they're putting that all in front of a very simple thing of, do you criminalize child sacrifice or do you not? Every second that you don't, you have the wrath of God on your nation. And that's just one of the sins. You could do it with others, but it's just a very glaring. If you're going to pick one thing in the Bible where God says, if you don't do this, I will turn my face against you, it's extremely clear. Like, if your leaders do not do this, your leaders need to be removed. This and the high places are connected to that. They are sacrificing children at the high places, and we're leaving the high places. We'll look at the arguments whenever I debate, say, a Doug Wilson or Joe Rigney or something like that, or any of those cross politics guys. Who do they argue for to justify their incrementalism? The kings that left the high places.
Right, the ones that didn't go all the way, the other than Josiah kings.
Yeah, and they say that, look, God was okay with them. No, God was not okay with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
in the same way that God's not
okay
with divorce, but that's that is God's prerogative, not ours. I think that's the difference. The difference is God doesn't say to us, I will allow you to tolerate evil as I'm working out my sovereign plan.
Right.
God says, no, I, in my sovereign secret will, I will tolerate human evil and sinfulness, and I will allow certain laws in place in order to accomplish my purpose. But to that one-to-one, I've always found that argument so brutal, that God in his patience and his long suffering tolerates sin on a large scale in order to accomplish his purpose. Therefore, we also can tolerate sin in order to accomplish our purpose. But we're not God, and he doesn't give us that authority. He doesn't say that's your job too.
Yeah. And they bring up all these things like that, whether you're talking about leaving the high places up or allowing divorce or regulating slavery, it's always that. We would have a different situation in front of us if there was some portion of scripture where the law or a prophet was saying, God wants you to give people a certificate of child sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so, and what's often so mind-boggling about all this is these are men who uphold the scriptures with their tongues, but they actually deny this. This is like Bible believing and applying stuff 101. And if you dig, eventually they'll just leave a podcast. But if you dig, you're not going to find any kind of biblical apologetic or sound theological reasoning. At the bottom of that, you're going to find lack of faith, that it is being done from a lack of faith. They do not believe that you can abolish abortion. They do not see an end, light at the end of the tunnel, except for by compromise. And so what they do is, I think, sin. It is lack of faith, it is disobedience, and it's outright contrary to the commands in Scripture. And you're precisely right. They run to any time at any time that God, in his grace, did something like allow a certificate of divorce, and they say, oh, because God did this, we can do this. And it is absurd. Like, what in the world? Okay, so every time there was adultery in the Bible, God allowed it, right? Sovereignty. Like, God has allowed adultery, right? And he's sometimes allowed it to carry out his, like David committed adultery. There's a lot of instruction in that story for us, right? Well, God allowed adultery so I can cheat on my wife, or I can pass laws allowing adultery. You can't pass laws allowing adultery, but that's what we do. Why? So it's this mind-bogglingly basic, unbiblical, and I think trash obedience, awful disobedience to God. And not only is it being put forth as the opposition to a biblical movement to abolish abortion, it's being put forward by the most esteemed and respect. It's not being put forward by the Joel Osteens or the, Creflo Dollars, or it is being put forward by the most heralded and esteemed people. And it tickles so many people's ears. Abolitionism's hard. You want me to do what? You want me to step out in faith and do what? These guys are tickling ears. There's tons of them. They have power. They have bigger platforms than any of us that believe this contrary idea. And they are leading believers astray into disobedience. Now, I do want to say, I don't think that means they're not saved, but I do think it means that they are dangerously disobedient. And I fear the wrath of God on their lives. And the thing that I'm seeing, just to be a little bit, since we can move on off of this, but I'm happy that we're on this because it's the most important thing facing the church. But the thing that I see is that there's so much judgment being poured out on these people. They're being actually platformed with these ideas and getting more and more praise. Their kingdoms are expanding. They're growing, like their hearts are being fattened in a day of slaughter. And they're given like great places and opportunities. They're getting to share stages, but they are doing things that they are taking stages and speaking alongside people and going on programs and doing things that themselves 20 years ago would have found deeply problematic. Like, they are acting contrary to their own quotes. They've become the careful men, right? They've become the kind of people that their younger, hardcore, zealot Christian selves would have condemned. They are a massive problem, and until the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ actually can see rightly that it's not just the Democrat, pro-abort, liberal, progressive that is the problem. It's the person that comes as an angel of light and seems like a very, very good thing, like that's doing and saying all the right things, that is wrong. That's the person that we need to stop following. And we may be
So
on the cusp of that.
well, and I think these discussions matter because what we're seeking to do is we're seeking to have our pragmatics be principled, right? I think that there's an order here, and I've tried to convince people that really I think what this boils down to is which is first, your
Mm-hmm.
pragmatics or your principles. And I think if we say our pragmatics must be informed by our principles, that looks one way.
Mm-hmm.
But if we say, but my principles can be adjusted based on pragmatics, I think it
Mm-hmm.
looks another way. And I think that's the divide that we're seeing. So part of this
Yeah.
discussion and part of the reason why we keep pulling up all of these, not only descriptions in the Bible, but prescriptions in the Bible, Old and New Testament, is we're trying to drill down into what are the actual principles, what are the truths and principles and values and guidelines that God has either commanded or displayed through story and history that we
Mm-hmm.
can make sense of. And it's this kind of work that the church has been doing a terrible job of for the last several generations because we've been coasting in
Mm-hmm.
a relatively comfortable, softly post-Christian culture that hasn't been too difficult. But now
Comfort's
all of a
dangerous.
sudden, and COVID really put this on blast, is now all of a sudden the church is having to say, okay, let's actually go to the scriptures here and understand why we do the things that we do. Why do we engage with the state the way that we do? Why do we do culture the way that we do? I'm glad for it. It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
There's gonna be friction, obviously, because
Yeah.
people will approach it differently. But I'm glad for the discussion. Really
Yeah.
quick before we wrap up, because I this was I'm grateful for this conversation, Russell. This was
Yeah.
good to unpack this. I want people to understand why we're seeing things and saying they are the way that they are, to help people make a biblically informed
Yeah.
decision and really have a good hermeneutic, right? Like how we interpret the Bible and how we apply the Bible.
Yeah.
In this case, quite literally, is the difference between life and death for
Yeah.
preborn babies. But
Right.
you're braving the Great White North. You're coming to Canada. I commend you for it. Tell
Looking
us a
forward
little
to
bit
it.
about the conference that's coming up. Let's talk a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah.
And what are you doing? Why? Just kind of let's tease it out a little bit. We're gonna
Yeah.
be talking more with some other people about it, but let's talk a little bit about you coming up to my nation.
Yeah. I'm excited. First time ever in the Maple Leaf State, or I don't know what I don't know what it's just like the Maple Leaf, like
It's the Great White North.
the Great White North,
Yeah.
where everyone says, man, they got weird accents, and I'm like, I don't hear their accent. Like everyone I talk to from Canada just sounds like, for me,
It's
I
because you haven't talked to anyone from the East Coast yet.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll run into them, but and then you got the French Canadians and all that, but like I'm excited about going to Canada, but it's weird in that it's kind of like I live in Oklahoma. It's like the center of the galaxy. It's like the center of the U.S. The center. I mean, it's just the center, and it's pretty conservative and stuff. I live in the most liberal area of Oklahoma, kind of around the University of Oklahoma. But whenever I travel to California or something like that, people are like, "Oh, you're brave. You're going to California." And I'm always like, it's not that bad. California is really similar to Norman, Oklahoma. You run into the same people with the same beliefs, and the same gospel applies to them, and I don't really see all that different. But going to Canada, it's like twice that. They're like, oh my gosh, you're going to Canada. You're going to get killed. You're going to be like, I have people asking me if I'm prepared to be incarcerated. I'm just like, no. I mean, I guess I'm prepared to be incarcerated, but yeah, what I hear about Canada now is different than what I heard about Canada when I was a kid. It was they drink milk out of a bag. Now it's they hate free speech. And so I guess I don't know if I'm looking forward to that or not, but joining brothers and sisters there for I think it's called the Maple Abolition Mission and Conference. For the Maple, I don't know, is the society called the Maple Abolition Society, or is it just Abolish Abortion Canada?
Yeah, so at the conference is the Maple Abolitionist
Okay.
Conference.
Yeah.
And there's a big red leaf on the back.
Yeah, of course. You can't do anything with a big red leaf. But
Yeah.
I've never met, I've talked to Laura Clausen a number of times, but I've never met her in person. And a number of the speakers that I know and I've spoken with before and done things with. But I'm really excited to see that the abolitionist cause seems to be rooted and unified. Like the abolitionist movement is all these different organizations, and it's kind of like the pro-life movement has all these different pro-life organizations, and they're kind of unified in a basic save the babies thing. But the abolitionist movement is unified in, like the 5 tenets of abolition, a very gospel-centered, biblical, theological, providence-driven, and, abolitionist, not incrementalist or regulationist. And to see that there's such a strong group already established in Canada that they're able to do this is super rad. Very excited about it. So I think I'll be there for 4 days. It's a 3-day mission. There's talks and there's activism.
Yep.
Going out and doing stuff. And I'm just going to do whatever y'all tell me.
I think it's September 19th to 22nd. Let me just, I should have had these dates in front of me.
I think 18th to the 20th.
18th to the 20th. Yeah. Let's,
hopefully 18th to 20th. That's what
let's pull it up here. Yeah. September 18th to the 20th. Yep. So I look forward to being there, to meeting you in person. I met Laura a few times. I'm going to meet John in person. Matt Truella, I've interviewed him before. It'd be great to meet him in person as well.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it. And I'm excited for this conference. And Russell, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been great to talk through this and to chat with you and kind of help unpack these things for people. Really quick, where can people follow what you're doing, support what you're doing, and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So the website's just abolitionistrising.com, and that's abolitionist with an S. If it's and not just abolitionist rising, but abolitionist, not just me, all abolitionists. Abolitionistrising.com. Probably, we're on all the, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff if you're into the social media, but probably our primary way that we're trying to reach people beyond the same pockets that we all compete for is through YouTube. So if you can like or subscribe to us on YouTube, YouTube seems to do a pretty good job of allowing us to keep in touch with people through like the community page there. But then deeper than that, if you're, like the young hip kids, Discord has become pretty much the online community for abolitionists connected to us. So just go to the Abolitionist Rising YouTube channel, click any of the long form videos, do the description. There's a link to the Discord that'll take you straight to a Discord. You can go into the Discord and you can find not just me and the abolitionists that run Abolitionist Rising, but you can find abolitionists in your state or in your country, your nation, and then get connected there. So tons of like constant conversation about abolitionism, constant networking, because we're not just doing this to build an organization, get the likes and feed our families. It's really to build an army, all of those subscribes, all those members. That the plan is get them to be doers, not just hearers or followers, and mobilize them. So we have big plans to mobilize abolitionists across culture, to honor God and abolish abortion to his glory.
Awesome. Russell, thanks again so much for joining me, brother.
It's fantastic. Like going deep with you, man.
Liberty Dispatch has been brought to you by SDG Media. If you want to stay in touch with us on all things Liberty Dispatch, join our email list, or support the show, head over to ldcanada.substack.com.